Welcome to Beyond Politics, broadcast on WKXL and available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matt Robison. I'm really excited about today's show. I'm really excited. Look, I'm an NBA fan. I listen to a lot of NBA podcasts. I listen to a lot of sports podcasts. Big fan of The Low Post with Zach Lowe, Bill Simmons, and the BS Report. They do some gimmick shows. And I have wanted to do this kind of a thing. It's a gimmick. I will fully admit that it's a gimmick. I get it, but it's fun. And, look, there's so much in politics and in the world today that is downright a bummer, depressing, terrible, but it doesn't mean that we can't try to have a little bit of fun with it, even though the subject material is super duper serious. So I started thinking, how can I do a show that uses one of these fun gimmicks and, where we can just kind of chop it up with someone who's really super smart and incisive on politics. And that's where I thought of Jason Sattler. If you don't recognize that name, first of all, it means that you're not listening closely enough to our podcast. He's a previous guest on Beyond Politics, but more notably to his hundreds on hundreds of thousands of fans on Twitter. He's best known by his Twitter handle, LOLGOP. He's also a former columnist for USA Today, a current columnist for the editorial board, where I also currently contribute. And he is a fantastic political analyst. Jason, welcome back to Beyond Politics.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm a bit of a gimmick myself, so I think I am perfect for this kind of conversation.
Yeah, from gimmicks, right? Exactly.
Yes,
all right.
I live it.
All caveats understood here. There's a little bit of a gimmick, but it's a fun way to get into some of the biggest pressing, burning questions going on right now in politics. So the gimmick is, and I'm stealing Zach Lowe, Bill Simmons. If you're listening, first of all, retweet me. Second of all, I'm stealing from you. They did this thing. Are we sure that ... And they related it to the NBA. We're going to relate it to politics. And we independently came up with a list of are we sure that questions that we're going to lob at each other. And then we'll discuss. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. I'm gonna give myself the first question. Let's dive in. All right, here we go. Are we sure, Jason Sattler, that nothing even worse is going to come out on Herschel Walker?
I would say at this point in time, I would say the House looks like about 50-50 odds that it's going to go Democrat, 50-50 odds it's going to go Republican. The Senate, to me, looks similar. I think people kind of have different odds on that. That's how it looks in my brain right now. I would say there's 100% odds that we're going to get much worse information about Herschel Walker. I don't know if there's anything come out that's more embarrassing than Herschel Walker trying to talk about what Herschel Walker believes. I think that's probably the most embarrassing thing about Herschel Walker. There's something I've been trying to kind of articulate about him that feels as I become whiter as I say it, but there's an article today in the USA Today about how he embodies every negative stereotype about African-American men. And I think that's what Republicans like about him. So I think there is going to be scandal after scandal. We're going to get worse after worse. He is like Trump in that way, in the sense that the bottom is just a chasm that we can never see the bottom of. And it's not going to hurt him with Republicans. I think he has 46, 47%, and we're going to get much worse. I think he probably paid for half of the abortions in Georgia, to be honest. And I think that wouldn't, as Shannon Watts, who started Moms Demand, pointed out, if it was a woman, that would have ended his career. His campaign would be over. But he could pay for them all, because this is really about controlling women's bodies. It's not a hypocrisy for him to control women's bodies. That's what the whole thing's all about. So I think much, much worse is coming, and Republicans actually like it. They like that about him. That's what they're looking for in him.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, look, even before the news broke about this, they knew inside the campaign. I sound like Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight. Yeah, they knew. Okay. Like, they've known for more than a year. There's been reporting about this. There are four people with knowledge of the preliminary discussions about this within the campaign. This goes back over a year. And look, this is a guy who, USA Today is kind of right. He does embody the worst negative racist stereotypes that Republicans seem to hold, and also sort of their avatar. I just put out a video on Cliff Schecter's YouTube channel. People should check that out. It's called The Takedown, about how he seems to be the avatar for how Republicans think fathers should behave toward sons. Look no further than Donald Trump. But right. Yeah, with all of that prep, they knew about this for more than a year. They completely fumbled the response. He claimed, even though the woman involved brought receipts, like, this isn't what the kids are saying these days. They brought
Yes.
receipts. She
Yes.
literally brought receipts.
Yes.
And he's saying on
Cancel
TV,
check.
oh, I know nothing about this.
Yeah.
This is news to me. So they fumbled the response despite all that preparation. The point is, this is very Rumsfeldian. There are unknown unknowns to people inside the campaign. And given his pattern of behavior, a guy who's conceded holding a gun to his wife's head, stalking women outside a window, almost killing a man during a road rage. Yeah, there's probably more stuff out there. You say 100%. I'd go at least 50-50 that there are more shoes yet to drop. All right, you get the next one.
Yeah, I would say that, the scandal, the fact that it's about abortion hurts him more than the fact that it's about, because anything that abortion, just to add a little bit there, anything abortion hurts Republicans this year is kind of a big theme I'm saying there. So are we sure that the scandals even ranks in the top 5 of the worst scandals we've had for the Republican Party in the last, let's go back to, tapping in the bathroom at the airport in the early aughts?
Yeah, is this even in the top 5? All right, that's a tough one. This is like the Mount Rushmore of Republican hypocrisy scandals. I'm going to go with by gut no. So look, first of all, just this year, Republican Representative Clay Higgins also had to concede that he put a gun to his wife's head, threatening that if she divorced him, he would kill her. And this is someone who's endorsed by top Republicans and Donald Trump. I mean, this is in the same cycle. This is basically the same thing that is toward the top of the list of Herschel Walker's crimes. So, I mean, right there, you have something that's at least on par. But yeah, you were just referring to Larry Craig, the Republican senator who was caught in a Minneapolis airport bathroom with his for the kids out there, just Google Larry Craig scandal. It's just breathtaking. It's absolutely breathtaking.
It's a time capsule of homophobia too.
Yeah. Really. Oh, it's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. He does this. I could not make this up. I think I'm a pretty good creative writer. You are too. I could not invent this. David Vitter, the Republican senator from Louisiana, who his phone number was found in the little black book of the DC madam, who was running a prostitution ring. That was a good one. Let me hit you with Mark Foley again for the kids out there. You have to Google from 16 years ago. This is a Republican representative who was sending suggestive messages to teenage boys who had previously served as congressional pages. Speaking of creepy predator behavior, how about Roy Moore for you? Just 4 or 5 years ago. So this isn't even, I forgot the coup de grace. I forgot the big one. How about Donald Trump, who has been accused by at least 18 women of sexual harassment or sexual assault? So no, Herschel, I'm sorry. You are not even in the top 5. You don't make the top nominations for the Heisman Trophy of Republican hypocrisy. There's so much. Your coup de grace, I thought it was going to be Dennis Hastert, and but that didn't come out till after he was out of office. And thinking back to that 2006 era of to tie it back to Herschel Walker, another read Ralph Reed, who had got caught up in all of these different scandals. He thought his career was over in 2006. Just extorting money allegedly to Native Americans and tribe, just horrible things. And Ralph Reed is the guy who's out there telling us today that Herschel Walker saved, so we don't need to worry about anything he's done in his past. So the full circle is not even, it never stops spinning, the hypocrisy wheel in the Republican Party. Yeah, it's all right. So Herschel Walker is now a multi-time loser here. It's going to get worse for him, we're saying. And even despite that, he can't even crack the top 5 in the worst hypocrisies of the last 20 years. All right. Here's one for you. This is a little bit of a layup because I think I know the answer on it, but are we sure that Democrats are about to lose the House?
We're not sure. We're not sure of anything at the point. I think that's why this is such a great topic for this. Are we sure? Because we all wish we were sure about everything. We wish we had that needle. Actually, that's the needle that drove us crazy in 2016 and could actually point in the right direction of what's going on here. Like I said, I jumped the gun and got deep into this, and I think it's 50-50. I think here's my big prediction on this. I think whoever wins the House is going to win the Senate and vice versa. I think
that's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's going to be somewhat of a wave. I don't think that the party that loses is going to get out unscathed. I don't think it's going to be a split, and which is very, very scary in a lot of ways. There, I think the predictions. I mean, the Democrats are now. There was a new CNN poll that came out today where Democrats are up, I think, at 2 or 3 points on the generic ballot, and then they look at competitive districts and they're behind like 6 or 7 points. It is so hard to tell. Gerrymandering. There are 5 to 6 districts in Mississippi and Louisiana that should be Democratic competitive districts. The Democrats should have a shot. There's a competitive district in Rhode Island that could end up going Republican for the first time since they invented Rhode Island, or it was discovered by Rhode. There are wild things going on here. Even in Michigan, we have a House race where John James, who's lost the Senate twice, it looks to be up in this district where Gretchen Whitmer is up by almost 20%. So that, we have straight ticket voting in Michigan, which is something that will bring the numbers even, but it makes it really tough for a Republican to win if it's a huge Democratic wave. So I'm thinking this is wave either way, and I think to me it's as likely it's a Democratic wave as it is a Republican wave at this point. But we have the Saudi Arabians making sure that our gas prices are going up. That helps Republicans a lot. So there are just incredible amounts of variables that just make this so unpredictable that this is a big, are we sure? No, we're not sure of anything. But I'm interested to see what you think.
I think it's essentially, it's interesting that you think it's all going to be kind of correlated one way or the other with the 2 chambers. I'm not so sure. I think that the races, it does come down to a lot of randomness and a lot of individual races that may turn on the idiosyncrasies of those individual races. We just saw that we were talking about Georgia and Herschel Walker and, crazy stuff with Fetterman versus Oz for that Senate race in Pennsylvania. Each one, it's like the Anna Karenina principle. Every happy family is the same. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Each of these races is unhappy in its own way. And
right.
You could see some divergence emerging here based on the particulars of a race. The big question is, I think what you just raised is like, is there going to be a further October surprise? Is there going to be another shoe to drop in one of these races? Something that's specific to one of them. Like if you're in a Virginia 2 House race or Pennsylvania 7, one of these ultra tight swing seat races. What if you get a late scandal? What if there's something particular to the dynamics of that district, like a gas price rise hits particularly hard there? There's a high profile murder that makes the crime issue more salient. All these things are so hard to predict. I just don't know. But I'm not sure. I'm far from sure. All right, over to you. You're up.
Yeah. Yes. I would say to you, have we thought about now, thinking about how bad Republicans are doesn't ever kind of give us a prediction of how bad they could be. Have we thought, are we sure we know how bad it could be if Republicans take the House?
I have an excellent imagination. I sound like Donald Trump. I have a great brain, right? It's
the greatest imagination.
What the hell does that mean?
I've been told by Imagineers from across the land.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a no, and I'm going to give you a no for a very simple reason. I just had former U.S. Senator Russ Feingold on the show. You're in good company, Jason. And he's talking about his new book about the right-wing move to call a new constitutional convention, to rewrite the Constitution under kind of a right-wing Looney Tunes fantasy world vision of the world. And his point is, we're a lot closer to this happening than we realize. A Republican House, so if Republicans take the House, they could just deem that we've met the threshold to have one of these new constitutional conventions. And his point is also that even if it doesn't come together, there could be all kinds of confusion, chaos, uncertainty. Is this real? There's like a right-wing like conspiracy mob that's been getting together in hotel conference rooms and like live drilling this and planning it sort of. It's weird. It's like Super Bowl team doing a walkthrough. So for that reason alone, I think that we have not really thought hard enough about how bad it could be, because there are all these crazy pathways. I mean, there's all the conventional stuff like, yeah, they can give tough votes to swing seat Democrats. They could impeach Joe Biden. They could do all kinds of Benghazi style investigations. But I think it's this, your question was, have we thought about it? And I think there is stuff that we haven't thought enough about that could be really, really bad.
And for instance, refusing to certify a Democratic president becoming president ever, you can't win. We've decided that the rule is that only Republicans can win if we have, at a certain point, the Congress has to certify the winner of the presidency. And as we learned on January 6th, that is not as much a foregone conclusion as we imagined at one point in history.
So let me hit you then. I had one here that was the sort of the Senate version of this. Are we sure that Republicans aren't about to take over the Senate? And I mean for the foreseeable future here, because, not just this cycle, but kind of rolling forward, because if they do, they could basically sabotage the ability of any Democratic president to govern, and they could continue to sort of hold their hammerlock on the Supreme Court. Are we sure that they aren't about to sort of occupy the Senate for a good long time here?
This is what keeps me up in the morning. This is the late keeping me up, because we're talking about wild variables. Would anybody think that Nevada would be closer than Arizona? Would anybody think that Nevada would be closer than Georgia or maybe even Pennsylvania? Like, we could lose, if Democrats lose Nevada, the chances of them holding a Senate majority for the next, getting a Senate majority back, even the 50-50 majority, we have the barest, the white knuckle majority that we have right now is almost impossibility. We have a chance right now, the only chance we have of this decade, to pick up North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. If these seats are lost, the chances of them being won again in 2028, when there's a Republican president on the ballot, are almost zero. The chance of Democrats ever getting a Senate majority is very, very spare if they lose it this time. I don't know why there isn't a mass movement, because this is, Republicans have said, even St. John McCain was saying in 2016, if Hillary Clinton's elected, we're never going to appoint a Supreme Court justice. And this was in the middle of the Merrick Garland mess. That's not just, you can't appoint a Secretary of State. You can't appoint a Secretary of Defense. The NR, there's some really good labor stuff that's going on, as weak as our labor laws are, because the NRLB, which is difficult to say, and I'm not even sure if I got the acronym right. Democrats have a controlling of that board. The chance of that ever happening again, if they don't keep the control of the Senate, if we lose one of those seats, are zero. I just think there should have been a bigger movement of, Soros and I should have sat down in March and said, listen, winning these Senate seats, we can't let Nevada even be close. I know Adam Laxalt, who's the Republican nominee, who's a well-known guy there, had 14 members of his family come out yesterday and say they wouldn't vote for him. But that's not enough, because it's still way too close in Nevada. So anything to add to that one?
What worries me is the 2024 map. I think you said it all. I would just kind of put an exclamation point on whatever the things look like this time, and it does look pretty close that we might hold on to the Senate. 2024 is not great. There are 30. The way it works in the Senate is, 100 senators, and they do a third of the seats every 2 years. So there are 33 Senate seats up for re-election or election in 2024. 23 of them are held by Democrats, which means there are a ton of targets. And a lot of those, if you kind of go seat by seat, you have incumbents like Ben Cardin in Maryland, Tom Carper in Delaware, who aren't necessarily committed to running for re-election and might be the best, if only, candidate. They're credible Republicans like Larry Hogan in Maryland, who could come in and really contest those seats, to say nothing of John Tester in Montana and, of course, Joe Manchin in West Virginia. It's going to be a rough cycle. And so, if we don't hold on now, and especially if Republicans get the opportunity to keep burrowing in on some of these Secretary of State races, let's say they get independent state legislature theory through the Supreme Court, there's all kinds of shenanigans that could tilt the map and make it even harder for Democrats in 2024. If we can't get through that particular narrows, we could be in trouble for a while.
Are we sure that we shouldn't be paying more attention to North Carolina than we are to Ohio? Ohio has gotten a lot of attention because J.D. Vance is so bad. He's so kind of an obnoxious and but are we not paying enough attention to North Carolina to kind of, tie it together here on the Senate?
All right. I'm going to hit the hot take alert button here and say I actually kind of agree with the way Democrats are treating both of these, which is to ghost them like Herschel Walker ghosting his children. I think that the lack of investment. Look, Steve Schmidt, the noted Republican strategist, tweeted earlier this week that he's shocked. He's shocked that the Republicans have injected $40 million of MAGA money into J.D. Vance's campaign in Ohio, zero for Tim Ryan. And he's like, what's up with that? Well, I'll tell you what's up with that is that if you look at North Carolina and you look at Ohio, they are Lucy and the football for Democrats over and over again. In North Carolina, right now, Bud holds, could you come up with a better Republican candidate? Bud, 538 has him 70% chance to win over Sherry Beasley. The polling average, he's over 50%, 50.6%. And then you look at Ohio, it's basically the same deal. J.D. Vance is a 70% likelihood to win on 538. And the point with both of these states is this is triage. You've got to triage when you're looking at the national map. The thing that matters ultimately, it's like my favorite quote from Apollo 13, power is everything. They meant it about a spacecraft. I mean it about elections. You need the majority in the U.S. Senate. You've got to get to 50 if you're the Democrats. And you don't really care. I actually really like Tim Ryan. I was a staffer when he was a congressman. I really like Tim Ryan. But I'm sorry, that's not the pathway that gets us there. And if you look at those two states compared to the others that are on the board, Ohio, super expensive media markets. You've got to plunk down a lot of your precious resources to really contest things there. And you're judging, where's my better pathway? Is it there? Or is it Nevada with Cortez Masto, who is at least a 50-50 shot? Is it maybe Pennsylvania, where Fetterman is consistently up 3 to 5 points in the polls against Mehmet Oz? If you hold New Hampshire, where Maggie Hassan is up over Don Bolduc pretty consistently, anywhere 6 to 10 points, you really are down at that point to, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. Well, we've talked about Georgia. Every poll that's come out since the abortion news on Herschel Walker has shown Raphael Warnock up, including from pollsters who previously had Herschel Walker ahead. So it looks like Warnock is in a decent position there. We know that's a purple state. We know it's a state where Democrats can win. And Arizona is also looking like a better deal for Democrats. Bottom line here to me is, North Carolina, it would seem like a good shot. Ohio, it would seem like a good shot if these other places weren't better shots. So I am sure that those races should continue to wither on the vine from National Democrats' perspective.
I would just add one thing to that is I heard kind of off the record from a pollster is the best matchup you could have in 2022 is to be a pro-choice woman running against a anti-choice man. So to me, I am Charlie Brown. I won't go after the football. I think Tim Ryan's greatest accomplishment is getting them to have to spend any money in Ohio. Republicans shouldn't have to spend a dime unless they're running against Sherrod Brown to hold that seat. But I do think Sherrod Beasley could surprise. I've also thought that, in the past, I thought that we were going to hold the Senate seat in 2014 and when there wasn't a chance to do it. At least there is a history in the recent history of Democrats winning it. When we start talking about Utah and we start talking about real fantasies like Missouri or Ohio, Democrats thankfully haven't gone for the football that bad this time. I think North Carolina, Lucy could have tricked me with that one. I do think, Tim Ryan holding his own is interesting enough on its own.
Well, look, this is no consolation to those candidates and the Democrats in those states, but you're doing a massive service for America by tying up huge amounts of Republican resources there. You're just, if you're talking about, crunch time and triage, we just can't go all the way. All right. I've got one for you. And this is,
Please.
I thought of this particularly because you are a Michigan political expert. You're based in Michigan. You wrote a great piece for the editorial board a few months ago about why we should all be paying more attention to Michigan. We talked about it on Beyond Politics. So your girl, Gretchen Whitmer, are we sure that Gretchen Whitmer isn't going to be the front runner for the 2024 Democratic nomination?
If she were a man, she would be 100%. I would guarantee it. And you're seeing this, starting to see this because Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who's another great candidate, is showing similar poll numbers. I'll just tell you how bleak it is for Republicans right now in Michigan. And, this could be cocky and this will all come back to bite me, of course, but that's the risk we take when we conjure the political gods and start talking about the future. But there's a poll that came out this morning that showed Gretchen Whitmer up 11%. And Republicans are celebrating that poll because the last one showed her up 16%. She's not going to win by 11%, even though she won close by 10% last time, just because we have straight ticket voting in Michigan. As again, that means you vote Republican, you vote Democrat, you're pretty much done. We have enough Republicans here where you're not going to win that big. But I do think this is an issue where Gretchen Whitmer has taken on abortion rights, bodily autonomy, whatever you want to call it, controlling your own body, basic human rights, the things we were born with that we thought we were going to have for the rest of our lives, and championing that. We have a law that banned abortion in 1931. She personally went to court to protect that law. She was able to win in court. Because of that, we still have basically Roe in effect. We also have a ballot initiative on the ballot, Prop 3, which would basically codify Roe. So she has so many things going for her, and she's so grabbed the zeitgeist that if she looked like Ron DeSantis, which would be like George W. Bush impersonator on Cameo, that she would definitely be the front runner, and Joe Biden would be miserable because they'd be talking about it all the time. This is a state you need to win, and she is so dominating that state that we would absolutely be talking about it. But I also think there's another interesting point to tie back to. It's so interesting to see what happens in a state where we've expanded voting rights, we've gotten rid of gerrymandering, and the Republican Party has just crumbled. It's just propping them up. It's just we talk about all these little tricks that they have, the independent legislative theory, the Constitutional Convention, all of these things they're doing that to take power that are illegitimate, that are just changing the rules of the game late. And when it gets fair, the party just disappears and they nominate absolute blathering fools because that's who the party has become at this point when you're remade in the image of Donald Trump.
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting that you say that. It reminds me of your question about when you were asking me, are we sure that we've really thought about how bad things could be in the House? What I completely skated over is Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are going to be in leadership positions if Republicans take over the House. And, it's like at a certain point, Democrats keep hoping that the utter obviousness of how insane and foolish I think the portmanteau is ignoramuses. It's like when you're stupid. And I can't say the word for our radio listeners.
Right.
You get where I'm going with this. It's like the Republican Party is filled with these people. And Andrew Sullivan wrote this past week, Herschel Walker is the GOP these days. He is. I'm sorry to my Republican friends, including panelists who appear on my show every week. I'm sorry. This is what the party has become. There's not really a difference anymore. And I just wrote this. I just wrote this for the editorial board that Democrats were right to meddle in all those Republican primaries because the people who are carping on about, how can you speak out of both sides of your mouth? All these MAGA big lie types, they're so terrible. How can you prop them up? It's like the inherent assumption there is that there's really a difference between those people and the supposedly more moderate alternative candidates coming out of they're all going to vote the same. They're all going to knuckle under to Donald Trump and MAGAism. The very few that have some backbone left to stand up to that kind of thing are the Liz Cheney types who are getting rolled out of the party.
Yep.
So I'm sorry. I actually am someone who believes in a healthy conservative party in this country. As a counterpoint, we do better when we have two parties that are in competition and communication, talking to each other, restraining each other's, most extreme impulses. I'm a centrist. So I would like to see a healthy Republican Party. I would. We just don't have one right now. So no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I just have to throw in there, there's one point is I don't think we need a healthy conservative party. I think we need a healthy centrist Republican Party that just doesn't exist. And it's just a dream to believe that. But I think your point about I loved your article, that article about so-called meddling that Democrats are doing. We have a race, one of these races here in Michigan where Meyer, one of the Meyer heirs, if you've ever been to Michigan, we have like they're the Walmart's, your fancy Walmart are Meyers. He voted for the impeachment, but he also voted against the first impeachment. He also voted against voting rights. He voted like every other, he had one good vote and he lost his career over that one good vote, which is sad for him, but it was the only good vote he ever took. And the meddling the Democrats so-called did in there is he was going to lose anyway. They did an ad beforehand explaining how bad his opponent was. And that supposedly helped him. So why is that meddling? Why is that Democrats' part? As you point, this guy loves Donald Trump. He's just like Donald Trump. He would throw at your vote. How is that? If that helps him, then your party's the problem. It's not our party's the problem. He was going to win anyway. And Democrats needed to get out there and make sure when the story is, when they win, it's like he is already branded and people know who they're getting, because otherwise people have this memories of George H.W. Bush, who still did the Willie Horton thing. But like we have this memories of a Republican Party that made sense. And you can't let people believe that that's the Republican Party that exists today.
Well, look, it's really hard for me because, as I pointed out in the article, the things that I am most proud of in my career as a congressional staffer, I achieved working hand in partnership with Republicans. Things like expanding healthcare coverage for young people, which became part of the ACA, things like creating an economic development commission. Again, like I'm not trying to overinflate my role in this. I'm a staffer. Sure. They're members of Congress, but I was doing the legwork and all this stuff. And I was doing it sitting down with Republican colleagues who I genuinely liked, respected. We'd hang out together. We'd do work together. I felt the same way when I worked in the state Senate of New Hampshire. I had and have Republican colleagues who I maintain relationships with, who I genuinely respect. So I am pining for that yesteryear harder than just about anyone I know. It's an illusion. It doesn't exist anymore. And it's sad. By the way, just quickly back to your Gretchen point about, look, I think the threshold question is Joe Biden going to run again? And it seems like, based on what he just told Jake Tapper in an interview, maybe, his decision in the 2020 cycle was he thought he was the only person who could beat Donald Trump. I happen to agree with him. I think he was right about that. And what he basically in code language just told Tapper was, if I think that's still true, I will run again. If I think someone else could win, I won't. And so, that's the threshold. But am I sure that he's going to run again? No. And I think as you start to look down the alternative list, notwithstanding the fact that our two most recent Democratic presidents were former senators, in general, the view is that governors are better positioned. They're not tainted by the stink of Washington. And, look, I think about the Paul Begala rule, which is there are only two kinds of election campaigns you run in America. It's let's stay the course, or hey, it's time for a change. And so what you don't want to be is a stay the course candidate up against a change candidate. And Republicans could very easily have a change candidate in 2024. And so we would want one as well. We'd want a non-Washington insider. It might be time to finally to have a woman who can win. We thought we had one maybe in 2016. We did not. And, I actually really like Kamala Harris, but she's not lighting it up in polls. So I guess my answer is I'm not sure. I wouldn't put Gretchen Whitmer at the very, very tippy top of the list, but there's a chance. I'd say there's a chance.
You made me think of two "are we sures" that I've had in mind, but I'm going to go with the first one because I think the last one is probably the one about the having in mind of Biden is probably a good closer. But are we sure on the other side that Carrie Lake, who is someone who is seeking nightmares early in the morning, the Republican candidate for governor in Arizona, and an insurrectionist, I think, who probably has the best chance of winning in the nation. Are we sure she isn't the front runner for Republican Party in 2024?
Let me be intentionally provocative about this
by
by stating more sureness than I actually have. I'm going to say yes, I'm sure that she won't. Even though deep down I'm not. I'm not that sure because, as you were just saying, it's such a qualification these days to be loopier than the next gal or the next guy. And she is nuttier than squirrel poo. But I think that there are, we used to talk in both parties about swim lanes for the nomination, right? And, you'd kind of say like, on the Democrats' side, well, there's a swim lane to be the progressive. There's a swim lane to be the centrist. And on the Republican side, I think there are 4 swim lanes in 2024. There's one lane that's, can you be Donald Trump? And there's only one swimmer in that lane. Okay. And then there's a lane that's right next to it, which is, can you be Donald Trump without his particular baggage? And I think Kari Lake has a legit shot to be the front runner in that lane, but currently Ron DeSantis is out front there. And she has some advantages. She's a better communicator than he is. She's a lot more polished than he is. She didn't cosplay a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader when she was inspecting a hurricane site like he did with those white boots last week. So, she's got some stuff going for her, but he's out in front in that lane. Right now, he has a huge national fundraising network. Fox News has been very DeSantis curious for the last 6 months. So he's out ahead there. There are some other lanes, right? Like there's the I'm anti-Trump, but not like in your face. So that's like the Nikki Haley kind of lane, maybe Chris Sununu from New Hampshire. And then there's the I hate Trump. We need to save the Republican Party and the Republic. Liz Cheney is out front in that lane, but she's going to get smoked. So, she's behind in all of those lanes. And I would say that I'm reasonably certain that she's not the front runner, but not 100% certain.
I will buy the lane theory if we can think of it in terms of it going around a bumper car rink. That's kind of what I think that Trump figured out about the Republican Party is they like Republicans that attack other Republicans. I think DeSantis is going to really suck at that when it comes into the primary. I think that Donald Trump, someone pointed out, someone's going to call him Miss Florida once and he's going to fall apart. I feel like DeSantis is Scott Walker in my mind. I was terrified of Scott Walker in 2020 and then he just, 2016, and he just completely crumbled and it's just turned out to be like an amazingly bad politician for someone who was a good politician at one point in time.
Yeah, I liked him better the first time when his name was pronounced Tim Pawlenty.
Right, exactly. The crumbling happened so fast. I think the thing that Kari Lake has going for her and why she's so scary, she is amazing on TV. And for someone who hates everything she says, for me to say that, she is just who Republicans, in a way, the female Trump. Like she just inspires that kind of vitriol and hatred and confidence in a focused kind of way. And if she goes after DeSantis and pantses DeSantis, I think she would quickly pull ahead of it. That said, there's a kind of follow-up on this that if I jump in, are we sure there's even going to be a 2024 primary? Because
No. Well, you go first. You answer your own question first. I have strong feelings on this one. No, go. Yeah. You go. You answer.
I feel like if Donald Trump runs, they're canceling everything. They're going to pretend to have a primary, and it just, they're just going to put it in a room in Mar-a-Lago and have it done in one day, or he's going to go to a rally in each state. I don't think it's happening. I think he controls the Republican Party in a way no one ever has.
Right? Why bother? Yeah. They've already shown that they're willing to go full authoritarian, like not like play footsie authoritarian. But they're going to cancel it. No, you're totally right. Here's my angle on this, and this is not original to me. I don't see a scenario where he doesn't run for two reasons. One is psychological. We've all kind of, made a cottage industry out of psychoanalyzing this idiot. But if he's out, he's irrelevant. All he cares about is seeing, the image in the monitor on TV and hearing himself. I like to hear myself talk too. That's why I'm on the radio. But for Pete's sake, I mean, if he's out, he's irrelevant. All these people immediately become relevant. It's the Sarah Palin effect. Like, she discovered, like, wait a second, if I'm not actually in a position of power and I'm just like an idiot,
nobody gives me money.
Yeah. So like that, there's that factor. But then there's also, he's like one step ahead of the law, maybe like half a step. And he's facing multiple real indictments. And his only hope might be to delay so that the prosecution becomes kind of practically impossible during the height of a presidential campaign, I think he's got to run for that reason alone.
I think that there's absolutely zero chance that Donald Trump gives up a chance to get the one job in the world where he can't be indicted.
Right. Or where he can at least play martyr and fundraise off of because this was all a money-making scheme to begin with, and it continues to be a money-making scheme.
And I think he really enjoyed that immunity and having the DOJ operating as his law firm. I mean, I think he absolutely aims for the power. He believes he is a kind of Norman Vincent Peale, old school, will yourself to power kind of Nietzsche kind of will yourself to power kind of way. And I said that they were going to have the primary in Mar-a-Lago. They probably have it at Nuremberg. But I think that Trump sees himself as having ultimate power, and he thinks he can win, and he needs to win, and the incentives for him winning, as you point out, are incredibly high.
The story just came out yesterday. He spent $7 million from the Save America PAC in his last filing on legal fees. We were wondering where that $100 million or so that he had on hand was going to go, because he wasn't spending it in campaigns helping anyone else other than himself. And yeah, I mean, this is probably, again, if he's irrelevant, if he's not running, then that money's going to start to dry up. It's going to start to go to people who are actually on the ballot. He's going to need it for all the incompetent lawyers who are themselves. You know what the joke is in Republican circles now? It's that MAGA stands for make attorneys get attorneys, because all of his lawyers are going to be under indictment too, because they all went and lied to the DOJ about the Mar-a-Lago files. All right, Jason, are we sure Nancy Pelosi won't retire in 2023? And I'm specifically saying in 2023.
I 100% believe she will retire if there's not a chance to pass serious legislation. So, meaning if she wins the House and Democrats don't have the Senate, she retires. If she loses the House, if Democrats lose the House, she retires. If she has a chance to pass legislation, and there's no one better at passing legislation, say what you will about Nancy Pelosi, you have her husband buying stocks he shouldn't be buying, and we have all kinds of problems. She's not the greatest on TV. She is the most effective Speaker of the House in maybe American history, definitely the most effective woman Speaker of the House, because she's the only one, but she is just a fantastic legislator. And Joe Biden wouldn't have had the successful that he did this time around if she wasn't in power. And if she has a chance to legislate, she's not going to give that up, is my opinion about that. What do you think?
If she's right. So if we hold a majority, well, yeah, I mean, that's a point. That's a point. Maybe you're right about that if we've got both chambers, maybe she rolls with it. I agree with you. And, I was a staffer during her first go round as speaker. And what I really admire about her is that she's much better as speaker this go round. And that's inspiring to me, that people can continue to improve and add to their game as they get older, even when they've achieved sort of the top rungs of their profession. Here's my theory on why Nancy Pelosi might retire in 2023. Her most important role, besides being a great legislator, is she is a massive rainmaker for Democrats. Her fundraising, if you go back, go on to Open Secrets and just look at, through September of 2020, her Nancy Pelosi Victory Fund raised $23.7 million. Her own campaign committee transferred another $1.6 million to the DCCC. Her leadership PAC contributed the maximum $10,000 to almost every House Democrat running last cycle. There are tens of millions of dollars coming through Nancy Pelosi. If you look at all the rest of the leadership Democrats in the House, boy, it's not even close. It's each gave about $1 million total. It's many, many multiples. So I think that she is going to want to be strategic about this. It's sort of a no-brainer to me that if Democrats are in the minority, she's not going to want to slog through that, and she's going to want new leadership to emerge. So I think she retires in 2023 to have a special election, safe seat for Democrats in San Francisco, let a new leadership, let that messy leadership campaign play out in 2023 rather than in the run-up to 2024. And let those new rainmakers emerge and get a national profile. But I think the same argument could apply if she holds the chamber, that she's going to think about the long-term health of the House. But I think your point is actually a really good one, though, that she has an opportunity to legislate while there's a Democratic president and a Dem trifecta. That may be too enticing. So maybe I'm wrong.
I'm going to throw a hot take that just came up as who could replace her as a fundraiser? I didn't even think about that. There literally is one person in the House who could.
AOC?
She's the only one who could raise that much money. And I mean, I don't think she has the votes to become speaker, but if you had a bunch of people being creative, she's shown an ability to work with a lot more people than a lot of people on the left have. And I don't think anyone else has that kind of profile and that ability to go across the country. And it's different. When Nancy Pelosi comes to town, she's not inspiring. There's not a crowd of people coming out there, but there are a crowd of millionaires who are coming out to see her. That would be different. AOC would go town to town. She would actually have a crowd who would come out to see her. But is the future of the party small donors anyway? Is something to think about.
Well, what Nancy does is she rainmakes from her ultra wealthy district. She does these like confabs. Believe me, like when I used to work for House members, what you wanted was the golden ticket. You were like Charlie Bucket in the Charlie Chocolate Factory. You wanted that golden ticket, which was the invitation to her big Napa fundraiser, which is like all the richest people in California descend on a vineyard. And all you have to do is show up, smile, not drool on yourself, and you will get $1 million for your. It's like it's like in The Dark Knight. It's like one night with my friends, says Batman, and you'll be all set. So there's that. And, Steve Israel, when he was the head of the DCCC, he could rainmake pretty well because, he represented a relatively wealthy Long Island district.
Yeah.
You're right about AOC, though. If you make her one of the primary fundraisers for the Democrats, it's mostly on the low dollar end. It's not that kind of high dollar end. And here's the thing about her. She, as the party, you don't want to do that. First of all, you don't want her as the face of the party because that's what Fox News wants. Second of all, she's not exactly play nice with the party and boost the whole team. I'm sorry if this sounds harsh to her, but she raised $20 million freaking dollars in her last campaign and she won by 50 points. She won by 50 points, people. And she wasn't like handing out those millions to her endangered colleagues. And she was like doubling down on, defund the police was a great slogan. It was a great strategy. Abigail Spanberger, you had a problem in your race because you didn't use social media right. So no, I wouldn't want that.
Yeah, it's a really question, about the future of the party. It would require her to want to do it in a way that would make her want to do compromises and change who she is as a person. But just the fact that she is basically trying to build up an insurgency in the party. That would be incorporating her, and would you would have to kind of it would be like biting her as a vampire, and she would have to give that up in a certain way. And I don't think she's interested in doing that as much. But it is interesting to see who could replace Nancy Pelosi. I didn't think Barack Obama was replaceable, and Joe Biden surprised on that way. But
right. Well, first of all, you're reminding me of that documentary, The Lost Boys. You never invite a vampire into your house; it renders you powerless. Although it is interesting. That's an interesting flip on it. The idea that, look, it's like LBJ said, you'd rather have him inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. And maybe if you could incorporate her into leadership. I wrote an article about this 3 years ago where I begged her, you're a leader now, AOC. You are a leader. So be a leader, be a leader. Think about the team, think about the welfare of the party. And if she did that, look, I just said this about Nancy at 70 plus, Nancy kept improving. She raised her game. She got better. She thought more strategically. AOC, is relatively young and she has plenty of opportunity to do that. She's super smart. Maybe.
From the left, I would say that the thing that she brings to the party that the multiple Democrats in their late 70s, 80s, 90s, hundreds and 110s don't bring to the party is she is connected to people who don't vote. And if Democrats could turn out to vote, and record numbers, people of color, younger people. If Democrats could get them to turn out the way Republicans have gotten white evangelicals to turn out, there would be no competition in the parties. You basically have a 2008 election every single time. So, is that such a promising allure that Democrats, that both sides could move towards each other. I would have to say I hope so. I think she's more in tune with the electorate than I not as in tune with DC, but I think she is in tune to where the country is going. The defund the police is a bad. I ultimately do not like any slogan that plays to Republican strength. But I do think she's right on in the sense that we spend more money on fighting crime and have more people in prison than anyone in the world, and have higher crime than anyone in the world. And it's a huge waste of money. I think there's a way to go at that issue that speaks to a lot of people. And having debates about slogans and being married to a slogan is kind of a weakness, I think, in anyone in any. But I think otherwise, she's an amazing communicator and right on.
And back to your question about like who would emerge. It might just be one of these things where, we're kind of ripping off this whole theme for today off of an NBA podcast. And, maybe we just haven't seen, we're a little blinded by all the talks about the top draft picks, but maybe we haven't seen the right person emerge yet. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, he likely inside track to be the next Democratic leader. There could be Katie Porter is a very effective communicator.
Katie Porter is kind of the AOC compromise version. She's a little bit,
right.
More like yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think we were just talking about Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, I think there is an opportunity. We wouldn't have said that Bill Clinton after 1988 and his interminable convention speech that he had to mock himself for because it was so damn boring. We wouldn't have said, okay, this is the future great communicator, sort of like lightning rod of the party. But he kind of grew into it. And there are people out there who we may not have even identified yet.
All the House managers from both impeachments could be potential leaders in a way like that was just an all-star team of potential other bench.
There you go. I mean, we just had Jamie Raskin on the show last week, and talk about a guy who's like got brains just like oozing out his ears. There's some possibilities there. All right. I can't even remember. Is it your turn or mine?
I think it's my turn. All
right, you go.
Yeah. Are we sure there's not going to be a constitutional crisis? Not in 2024, where everyone's predicting it, but in 2022. I'm not sure.
So, I think that this is one of those where it's less likely because you don't have the same setup of problems that you'd have in 2024 and that were present in 2020 when, you had Donald Trump in office and you had more Republican strategic control points. But what happens? You were just saying at the very top of the show, you think it's pretty 50-50 for both chambers.
Yeah.
And power is in the balance. This is a big deal. This is high stakes stuff. So what happens if it comes down to an election and there's a recount and Republicans are in charge of election administration in that state? So for example, we were talking about Cortez Masto in Nevada, and look, in Nevada, there's a Republican Secretary of State. I can't pronounce her last name correctly. Barbara Sagavsky. Anyway, and she did not go with the flow, the national flow. She was actually censured by the Nevada Republican Party for not having conducted an investigation into big lie, fraud,
right.
BS, but what if this all comes down to the election in Nevada and for control of the Senate, and she's under massive national pressure, and, we start seeing a lot of shenanigans there, and there's an open question. We have seen this happen before. There was the famous Durkin election in 1974, I want to say, in New Hampshire, where it played out for like 8 months. They couldn't decide who held it. Does either party back down when control of the U.S. Senate is at stake? Arizona is looking relatively okay for Democrats right now, for Mark Kelly. But what if it comes down to Arizona? We know what Arizona got up to last time with audits. And then there's that Russ Feingold factor that I mentioned before. So no, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure that we won't see a huge impasse and a bit of a crisis in 2022. What do you think?
We are going to have, regardless of what happens, who wins either side, we're going to have dozens of Republicans who are not going to concede their races. That's just
That's true. No, you're right. You're right. You're right. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, he has just made that the norm in the Republic. There's no cost. He's proven there's no cost to not concede. Conceding, is ultimately just a ceremonial kind of aspect of the government. But you see what happens when you don't concede is almost anything could happen. You could have an insurrection, for instance. So in cybersecurity, they call it a denial of service attack, where they just bombard a web page, for instance, with as many attacks as possible. It brings the site down. So what happens if we have, a lot of these are jokesters or people who are, if you do that in Michigan, we have a great Secretary of State, like you're saying, but you do that, what if, even in Virginia, we now have Republicans up and down the line who, these could be key House races in there, and you don't just have one or two of them. You have them throughout the country. And it's basically, you talked about them reenacting constitutional conventions in these hotel rooms. I think of these people as almost Civil War reenactors. I think they want the conflict. They want rise of conflict there. And you have someone who leads the Republican Party who any unrest is good for him, and his friend, who he models himself after, Putin, has the same kind of mentality. Anything that hurts our democracy is good for the authoritarians, the oligarchs, the billionaires. They want unrest. So that really is my worry there. And I'm a constant worrier. So that keeps me up at night.
I was just thinking of sort of building on because you actually, I buried the lead in newspaper parlance. You said the most important thing, which is, you're going to have all these people refusing to concede, and there are going to be pliant secretaries of state and election administrators who are Republicans who are going to engage in and indulge in and, want to buy into this. And the Supreme Court has weighed in on this because both chambers of Congress actually have the ability under the Constitution to refuse to seat members elect. And the Supreme Court has had to weigh in on this, and they did in 1969. And they limited the powers of the Congress to refuse to seat an elected member to when that individual doesn't meet the specific constitutional requirements like age or citizenship or residency or whatever. But okay, how much do we trust this Supreme Court?
Right.
How much do we? I know another precedent that goes back to only 4 years later than that the Supreme Court said was fine to. So, can I prove that if Republicans have what looks like a majority and they have a speaker and they say, well, we're not seating these three Democrats to give ourselves a bigger majority because we think that those elections were rigged, and then there's a lawsuit. Who decides? It goes to the Supreme Court. Do I feel sanguine about this? No, actually, You know what? You have convinced me. I am much more worried about this. Oh my gosh, you got me on this. I'm much more worried about this than I thought I was going to be.
I follow Mark Elias, who does the Democracy Docket, and he is, been on your podcast, I believe, and he talks about the horrendous amount of lawsuits that have already been filed this year in Georgia right now. There's tens of thousands of ballot, they're contesting voters. They're just picking random voters off the board. They're just trying to flood the system. And the courts held up really nicely in 2020. I have to, for as many people as done, but Donald Trump appointed a bunch of people as he was committing an insurrection and planning, so the courts are even worse than they were at the beginning of 2020. So basically our hope is that the courts hold up. And that's a rickety hope, as you were pointing out.
Oh my gosh. Wow. All right. I'm too depressed.
Yes, let's move on.
Let's move on. Oh boy. Are we sure that we've seen the biggest October surprise come out yet?
This is really like we are back in some 80s stuff right here. This is stuff that we grew up with that I think generations have kind of thought wasn't happening. But I think the October surprise that we all have to be considering, and it is really a horrific one, is a nuclear weapon could go off. And Putin has proven, and Biden's instincts about Putin have been proven to be extremely apt. He's gotten him, nailed him right there. The fact that Putin keeps talking about nuclear weapons, keep talking about a red line in Crimea, which is, Ukraine. He just decided it wasn't Ukraine, and he could decide the same about Alaska, and it's not his. You don't get to decide that. If you invaded it and you occupied it, doesn't mean it's yours. And Ukraine doesn't believe that part of the country, so there's a war going on, and they're trying to push him back, and they may go under. That could easily happen. I don't know who that helps, but that's the October surprise of October surprise. I grew up just imagining all the different ways we could have nuclear winter, and that's my October surprise. That my biggest fear that can have happen. Or that, or we get Hunter Biden's laptop and discover that he really is actually, the Unabomber or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. Already the approach of the Biden administration has been to view the Saudi decision to decrease oil production as essentially them throwing in their lot with Vladimir Putin and boosting prices in order to help Putin in his war. And so I guess it's not a foregone conclusion that Putin wouldn't strategically choose to set off a nuclear weapon in order to mess with our elections. I feel like he's done something along those lines before Russia and our elections. But I mean, look, history here suggests that there could easily be more and bigger shoes to drop ahead. In 1992, this is in the way, way back machine, the first campaign that I ever got involved in. The Secretary of Defense was indicted 4 days before the election. That was kind of a big deal. In 2000, we found out about George W. Bush's DWI a few days before that election. That was the big one. I mean, we're talking days. In 2016, we had the Comey letter, and that went out on October 28th. And there was very good evidence. Nate Silver did an excellent analysis of this on 538. It's worth Googling that. Yes, that tilted the election. That's why we ended up with Donald Trump. So, no, I'm not sure at all. But boy, this nuclear, you really went all the way on that. I hadn't thought about that one. That's terrifying. That's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and then literally, and I think if he were going to do it, he would probably do it if he were timed for an election. It'll be 2024 when he could really actually do the most damage. But I would say something about October surprises and some tying it back to Herschel Walker at the beginning. Everyone's like, is Herschel Walker going to survive this? Trump survived this. I argue survived that, or he's going to survive it. Trump survived Access Hollywood in several ways. First of all, that night, Access Hollywood tape comes out on Washington Post. That night, the WikiLeaks they start dumping emails. They're dumping emails every day. Emails. James Comey comes out, I think it was, said 8 days for election, 9 before, emails. So there was a kind of just a steady just avalanche of email news that just kind of destroyed Hillary Clinton. I think that's how Trump survived. It wasn't just because of, his political skill. It was because of just the highest level of intervention in our election by a foreign power and by another foreign power, the FBI. So I don't know if there'll ever be an October surprise like that, 2016. But I do imagine there is something. If there's not a nuclear weapon, there's going to be some sort of dump that comes from if there's any resources left in the Russian arsenal to be kind of targeting our election. There's going to be some hack that kind of comes out in the next week. We just have to anticipate that.
Ugh. All right. Well, I'm here for it, I guess. I mean, all the fun ones kind of pale in comparison to the very, very unfun one that you raised. So
yes. And let's lighten this up and talk about Dobbs and
there you go.
And Roe. Are we sure? Talking about this, there's a lot of are we sure here that this is going to be a normal election? Are we sure that Dobbs, which is this thing that Republicans have been working for 50 years, they overturned Roe. This is what the whole point of the Republican Party allegedly was, and had this massive backlash that we don't talk about very much in Kansas. In Kansas, abortion rights won by almost, it was 20 points, I think, that they won. Are we sure that this isn't, now that abortion rights are on the ballot every state, every election, are we sure there aren't going to be some random surprises that no one is expecting right now?
We're not sure. And I've given this mea culpa before, and I will say it again, that I did not anticipate how big an effect the Dobbs ruling would have.
Mm.
I judged from history where blows to abortion rights have always been predicted to be a big deal politically in activating Democrats, and they have not ever panned out that way before. Activists were arguing that this would be different because this would be a wholesale loss of rights that we'd never seen before, and that would be just a different proposition for voters. And the evidence so far suggests that they were right. That being said, there is some analysis that's come out recently that maybe that effect is fading a little bit. It's lost a little bit of its salience. Other issues have kind of risen. It's gotten a little bit baked into the political cake already. It's sort of had its biggest impact. But your question is, has that changed something on a fundamental level? Has there been like a break in the way people, and sometimes you see this, you see it with candidates, for example, where like the Mitt Romney, 48% of Americans are takers. It just fundamentally changed the perception of him. I think the basket of deplorables comment kind of fundamentally changed the perception of Hillary Clinton. Has something fundamentally changed about like the level of concern that Americans have about their fundamental rights under a Republican government? And I don't know. That it's a profound question. And I guess I would say I'm not sure. I would call myself skeptical based on the limited evidence we have that something fundamental has changed and that our basic partisan, hyper-partisan polarization isn't still basically ruling our political dynamics, but I can't be sure.
And the kind of evidence that suggests that it might have changed is, they looked at the voter rolls. Target Smart, Tom Bonnier looked at the voter rolls in Kansas and saw a bunch of younger women, especially registering to vote, women out registering men generally in every state where this is happening. But when we talk about that, the sample size is so small because we have done such a good, one thing we have gotten really good at is registering voters in America. Most people are registered. They don't turn out enough, but they are registered. So registration is a very small sample. But in Michigan, there's a lot of evidence that Prop 3, as I mentioned before, where Roe is literally on the ballot, is motivating people in a way. People are returning ballots by these massive numbers. So that would be my evidence for a different electorate than we might expect. And there's the two random things I just have to throw in there. The people, there's close governor races right now in Oklahoma and South Dakota, which are you probably don't care about, and it's probably not even worth thinking about too much because the numbers are wrong and it's really hard to poll these states and they're just so Republican, they're so baked in. But who knows? Who knows? Are there a bunch of pissed off women who are finally going to vote in a different way than they had? They're not going to vote for or with their husbands, and who knows? And I sure hope so. I just don't think Americans are going to tolerate giving up Roe, something that we expected we were going to have for the rest of our lives. That's my belief. And this may be just, superstition and just Pollyannaism. It just may be my patriotism, where I believe that we don't give up freedoms in America and we don't do it easily. That's just where I have to believe there's something that could happen that just is going to surprise people.
All right, let me hit you with, I think we should wrap, and we should wrap on maybe a good note, right? Like a positive note. Look, our president has taken a lot of guff recently.
Malarkey, what some would say.
Yeah, a lot of malarkey. He has lost a step. He's lost a step. There's no doubt about it. But the question is, are we sure that fundamentally Joe Biden isn't really, really good at politics?
I would even I was not a Joe Biden fan. I was Elizabeth Warren. I was, I think I lean more to the left than you. I was like, I don't know why he's running. I think he's running I thought he was running for the same reason that teenagers have sex, and what else are you going to do? I just, I just didn't think he was the right guy at the right time. You thought he was the right guy at the right time. The people who thought that turned out to be right. I was really down on Joe Biden when when the Build Back Better bill fell apart, and that we had this infrastructure bill that's, a lot of money, but a lot of money for the same old stuff we've been doing forever. When Build Back Better became this Inflation Reduction Act, and that came over the line. We had the CHIPS bill that came over the line. We had, now he's come on, rescheduling marijuana with the student loan, education loan forgiveness. And he said, and I mean, the interview where I think it was either Jake Tapper, he did one other interview recently where he said, look at who has accomplished more than me in 2 years. And there really is only a couple of answers. Possibly Barack Obama, just because the ACA was just as a huge piece of legislation, just so, transformative. We are now have the lowest uninsured rate by far, and that's all because of the ACA. Thank God that happened before the pandemic. We were just blessed that had happened. You have LBJ, who just probably unmeasured in 2 years what he accomplished from 65 to 67. I don't think you can really compare with that. But him going out there and saying that, but you also have him creating more jobs, not him doing it, but more jobs created faster under him. And he sucker punched the Republican Party to pass the IRA. No one thought the IRA was going to pass. Everyone thought Manchin was gone. Everybody was like, how do we kick Manchin out of the party? Da, da, da. They sucker punched. They snuck it in there. They got the CHIPS bill. They got everything that he needed accomplished, and then passed that at the last possible moment. It was remarkable beauty. And that IRA maybe looked back as the most it could be bigger than the ACA in the sense that it could be the thing that saves us from just complete climate catastrophe. It transforms, in someone in Michigan, it transforms the American economy. It puts every incentive to create jobs and build manufacturing in America in a way that we haven't before. Turns everything green. Potentially everything good in a way that the only way we can do it because of the political will through the market. I just think what he got accomplished, as someone who wasn't a huge fan of him and wishes he had appointed more judges faster and do have a lot of complaints and just I wish people didn't decide the pandemic was over and he didn't go with it. I have a lot of complaints about it, but I have to say what he was able to put together at the last moment, I'm in a little bit of awe. And I'm not someone who's imagined I was going to be in awe by Joe Biden.
I noticed this headline from the Dayton Daily News. I don't regularly read the Dayton Daily News. I aggregate from elsewhere. Yesterday, we're recording this on Thursday, October 13th. Yesterday, the Dayton Daily News headline was Ohio's big win. It was an announcement that Honda and LG Energy Solutions are putting $4.4 billion into electric vehicle and battery manufacturing. It'll create more than 2,500 new jobs. And it just struck me. It reminded me that despite the fact that we're using a gimmick and we're trying to have fun with this discussion on a bunch of serious topics, you and I aren't in this for the sports match nature of it. If we were just sports fans rooting for red versus blue, we could be into football or basketball or whatever. We're in this because we're people who really care about the underlying work that goes on. When I was a staffer and I went to work and I would walk up literally under the shadow of the Capitol Dome every morning, I felt honored and sort of misty-eyed, and that never, ever went away because I thought what we were doing mattered and was consequential. And in the future, for the 2,500 people who are going to be working in Ohio on good high-tech manufacturing jobs because of the Inflation Reduction Act, it matters. And for the people who are going to be working at those new facilities with further billions of dollars of investments in upstate New York that were recently announced because of the semiconductor and manufacturing bill that was passed, it really matters. And you go down the line, the 3 million plus children who did not have to live in poverty because we passed the ACT bill, the COVID bill at the beginning of Biden's term. The list goes on and on and on. The 6,500 people who are incarcerated for marijuana possession for federal crimes, the thousands of students who are going to get relief, even if the executive order doesn't go through, just merely the ability to continue to have their interest abatement. The impact is so real and it's so profound. And I agree with you. Maybe FDR, maybe LBJ, I would say that Biden has surpassed Obama's impact, and it's really unrivaled, and it's really positive. And what's so revealing is that when you bring all of this stuff up with Republicans, they respond by saying Hunter Biden, or immigrants are scary, or crime bad, because
and they
there
show
is
up
no
at
response.
the ribbon cutting ceremonies to take credit for it.
And they ask for, we didn't even bring up the freaking infrastructure bill. Do you know how many Republicans voted against that and then quietly say, hey, Pete Buttigieg, yeah, I'd really like a bridge because there's one that's falling down. It's about to kill all my constituents in Mississippi. Could you help me out? All of this is happening. It's completely historic. And do I expect Democrats or Joe Biden to get a political benefit from it? No, I don't. And I have to console myself by saying, again, I'm not in this because it's a sports match. I'm in it because I care. And in 10 years or in 15 years, we're going to look back and say millions of Americans' lives are better off because of the last 2 years.
Did I think Joe Biden was going to be the one president in modern history who took on the prescription drug industry and actually won something? I absolutely did not expect the president from Delaware, from the credit card companies, to be the guy who did that. And it's so, the IRA is so packed with quiet, huge wins, that could have only happened if you pissed Joe Manchin off in the way that Mitch McConnell happened to do in a kind of unique way. That we're going to be unpacking those wins and sell it. If we still have a republic in a country in a few years from now, these wins are going to be unfolding here and here. And the story you're talking about in Dayton, in Michigan, there's 10 other stories like that, that you just kind of see over and over again. And it like you said, it's not just those guys who are going to work; it's their kids who, perspective, aren't going to be dealing with this much drought and famine because we're using EVs and we're moving away from fossil fuels because of the IRA. It really is. It's just huge. It's really huge, and it's good, and as scary and as scared as I get, and willing to make you by imagining mushroom clouds. It is good to remember that there's actual good that gets done.
Well, there's one of those new words that people came up with, the Doppler effect, which is the property of stupid ideas coming at you so fast they begin to sound smarter. But I think we've had the inverse of that in the last 2 years. There's been so many accomplishments coming at us so fast. You're right. We're going to take years to unpack them and to see all the results. It'll be long past the midterm elections in 2022, the presidential election in 2024, the likely constitutional crisis and meltdown of the country in 2025. We'll be long past
Trump's
that.
third term.
Yes. In case we survive all of that, though, I think the benefits are going to continue. Look, speaking of the Doppler effect, we have thrown a lot of ideas out awfully fast over I don't even know how long we've gone. This is a new record for Beyond Politics, but it's been absolutely delightful, totally fun. Thank you so much, Jason Sattler. We'll just have to wrap it here, and we'll get you back for another one of these next time.
Thanks so much, Matt.